So I've now been using the FUJIFILM X-H2s for about 9 months or so. So in today's video I wanted to give you my feedback on this camera, the things that I like, I don't like, and also the thing that I wish could be improved in there. So first of all, how do I use the FUJIFILM X-H2s? Well, I use this camera professionally because that's my job now, I do this full time, and the FUJIFILM X-H2s for me is a video tool. Principally videos. Sometimes I do take pictures here and there, but mostly videos. I use it in projects that range from usually 1K to up to 5K, I would say, $5K, and in different kind of situations as well. Sometimes I will just go run and gun like this with just a lens on. Other times it would be with a gimbal, especially if I have to shoot cars or other kind of this kind of social videos with a lot of movement. And other time it will be fully rigged with the lens, with like matte box, screen, battery, etc. So it really depends on the kind of projects. But overall, this camera can be used in a very diverse kind of set of projects. And for this particular aspect, I'm very satisfied with it. It can be rigged down and rigged up based on my needs, and I've really been able to use it on different kind of sets. Also, I want to mention that I also bring this camera when I travel, because sometimes I just want to take video, or if I want to take some stock footage here and there. This camera is very good because it's not that heavy, yet it produces great result, but we'll talk about that later, and easy to travel with basically. Now let's talk about the image quality and the dynamic range that this camera has. I'm not going to talk about specs today because I've already talked about specs here and there about this camera on my channel, but this is more about a user experience kind of situations. Overall, for the kind of shoots that I produce, and I'm not saying that I'm doing extremely high-end shoots with this camera, but for the kind of shoots that I produce, overall I'm pretty satisfied. The dynamic range is enough. I have about like 14 stops of dynamic range with this, and usually I'm able to keep the details in the highlights while not having completely dead shadows and the opposite. Now there are some situations here and there where the highlights kind of get clipped somehow, but I've worked to, you know, a little bit underexposed when it comes to Fuji. That's what you should do. Of course, expose for your highlights, but learn to underexpose a little bit because it's easier to bring up the shadows than it is to bring down the highlights for this particular sensor. I see a lot of people complaining online that this camera is too sharp for them. Honestly, I didn't have that issue, and depending on the lens that you use, you can add basically the character that you're looking for. That's what I do with Takuma or IBIS lens when I use those on set, and I get the results that I'm looking for, so I would not be concerned too much about this. The addition of F-Log2 for this camera as well is very welcome. I pretty much, most of the time now, especially when I need a bit more dynamic range, I use F-Log2 a lot because it allows me to have that extra range that is more comfortable to work with. Now this does mean that the base ISO that you're using is a little bit higher, but the grain, and that's another point that I want to make, the grain that you get with this camera is overall very pleasing to work with, and if you don't want it, it's easy to remove it in post as well. So overall, pretty good experience with this camera when it comes to video. Now let's talk autofocus. I think that the autofocus works very well. A lot of people will tell you online that Sony is better, and Sony is better. Let's face it, it's true, it's better. But don't think that this camera can't focus. I see a lot of reviews online of people like the Fuji focus doesn't work at all. It's working fine. The X-H2s autofocus perform pretty fine. I don't have like huge issue with it. There are some cases here and there where you have like tons of subject. The fact that you don't have tap to track yet, hopefully yet, on the FUJIFILM X system That's something that I hope Fuji brings soon to this camera, especially because that's their camera for video, right? But overall, having access to subject detection with the AI, it's good with this camera. So if autofocus is essential for you, I would say that it's good enough. Don't worry about that. But lately I use this camera more and more with actual manual focus lenses, so Helios, Takumar, etc. And I just love it with manual lenses more. So autofocus for me, that's just my experience after 9 months. On a lot of projects that I've been working on, autofocus for me is not really a concern. I like pulling focus. Now when it comes to IBIS, the IBIS I would say is not the best in the Fuji system. I've used the S52X and the S52. IBIS is way better there. If the IBIS is a must for you and something that you absolutely want the best, I would say go Lumix for sure, 100%. So far from the cameras that are around this price range, I would say that those are the best that I've tried. The Fuji is not the best, it's still clunky, especially if you use wide angle lenses. It stabilizes your footage, don't get me wrong. You still have like stabilized footage, but like if you move around with it, you will see just, you know, some clunk here and there. Now let's talk about record limits and heat. And again, I'm not talking about specs right now, but my experience. So I'm not using, you know, the accessory with the fan with the FUJIFILM X-H2s. I've recorded long-form podcasts with this. I've recorded some events, etc., where I had to record for a while, and I've never reached the heat limit of this camera. Usually for this kind of long form, I would record in 4K 24. This would be like either long GOP or all intra, and I don't have any issue. The camera doesn't overheat. There is no like warning or anything with it. So the recording limit, honestly, I don't care about it too much. I don't think that I've pushed this camera enough for me to be caring about that. Now, when you rig it, that might have some impact, right? Because if you're using like a lot of output and a lot of connectivity, plus the screen, plus a lot of things, you might want to make sure that you cool it down with either the accessory or some extra fan or something. But for me, when I record long-term events or podcasts or whatever, I don't necessarily have to fully rig it, and I don't necessarily have to fully take advantage of all the ports. So that's one aspect that I would mention, is that don't worry too much about the overheating if you use it in normal condition. Now, if I talk about the codecs and the RAW capability of this camera, so most of the time when I work with this camera, I would either work in ProRes internally, so ProRes directly. I rarely work with the Blackmagic RAW right now because I found that the ProRes is good enough. I do my own post most of the time. Sometimes it happens that it's outsourced, right? But so I would rather, you know, slim down my workflow, and the ProRes works good enough, so I usually try to work in ProRes, and that's all good. So mostly ProRes, and also H.265, all intra or long GOP, they both work very fine. Now, if we talk about color grading the footage that you get out of this camera, well, I've got used to the Fujifilm system, and I would say that it's extremely easy to color grade, especially if you have a client that is not on the creative side and wants something very simple. Pretty much straight out of the camera, you get footage that is very usable. If you just go with the Fuji lot, you have something that is already usable. If you expose properly, you can add some adjustment to your exposure, but overall, I would say that color grading this, it works extremely well. If you are used to DaVinci Resolve, you can just add a few notes here and there. Well, you would just add your look or maybe play a little bit with your contrast depending on your taste. But overall, with the footage that you get and with the log and the F-log and F-log 2, they're very pleasing to work with. Now, build quality after 9 months, well, you can see the camera here. It lives in a cage, right? So I transported it all the time. The cage is on all the time. I never remove the cage on this camera because I use it mostly for video. And overall, the build quality is great. The screen is as new, the buttons are as new, the dials are as new. There's nothing that doesn't work on this camera. Overall, when it comes to the handling and the overall build, I would say that I'm still very happy with the way it handles. The grip is thicker than on the T series, right? So that's one of the advantages of the H series on Fuji. The 7 custom modes, very welcome, especially on the dials, because I can switch directly from 4K 24, 4K 60, 4K 120, ProRes mode, or B-roll, or 6.2K open gate, and all of those modes are directly programmed on my custom mode, so I don't need to care too much about it. I know that if I switch one dials, I know exactly where I'm going. So this is great also to work with. CF Express Type B is great to work with. You know that it's gonna be fast. If you need to export it, it's extremely quick to port it out of your camera and to a computer. Honestly, I like CF Express Type B, and as much as I can, I try to avoid SD card on this camera because, I don't know, SD card feels a bit more clunky to me. Now, let's talk about the things that I wish could be improved on this camera. And there are definitely some points. First, internal NDs. I think that if Fujifilm could make this camera, the Mark II of this camera, with internal NDs, I think that it would be great. Because most of the people who use this camera for video work, well, it's for video work, right? When you have to transport external NDs, it's something else to think about. And having internal NDs built in this camera would be just great. Would make it even one more argument in favor of it. And a lot of cameras in this price point don't have that. So that would be a competitive advantage for Fuji to have. So yeah, if you could put internal NDs in the Mark II of this camera, that would be great. But before we move to the Mark II of this camera, I would say that I want to have the monitoring tools that you have in the GFX 102 Mark II right now, because I'd like to have, you know, vector scope, false color also would be great. I'd like to have the parade, etc. Having more tools built in the camera when you don't necessarily want to have the monitor, an external monitor on, would be great to have. So firmware update, please. I'm still also waiting for the freaking, you know, the red square that I see right now on my X-T5 that I don't see on my X-H2s somehow. When is that coming? It's been, I think a lot of people have been asking for that for ages now, so hopefully anytime soon. Another thing is, for the next version of this camera, honestly, I don't think that we need SD card here. I know that some people say that having SD card and CF Express is great because it's more flexible, etc. But flexibility is not necessarily what the users of this camera are going for. I think that what they want is speed and also flexibility in terms of dual recording or in terms of safety, right? If you have a dual CF Express, that would be much better for the users of this camera than just SD and CF Express. Okay, so what is my overall conclusion on the X-H2s? I would say that after 9 months of use and abuse, the camera is not perfect. There are still some clunkiness here and there. The IBIS could be better. I would say that, yeah, internal ND would be great. There are some functionalities here and there that are still missing, but overall, this camera has worked great for me. You know, helped me pay the bills, that's great. and the image quality that it produces overall for the clients that I have, they are totally satisfied with it. Do I recommend this camera? Definitely if you're a video user first, and also if you're doing photography and you need to photograph fast moving subject, then you might want to have a look at that one. But it's a $2.5K camera, so make sure that you know that in advance, right? I think that this camera is made for professionals / semi-professionals who know that they're gonna make money out of this. If you're not gonna make money out of it and it's just for a hobby, well, think about it a bit more, but I would say overall, I recommend this camera. Alright, so that's it for today. Thank you for watching today's video. And if you've missed it, check out this video right here, where I talk about the cameras that I think you should buy in 2023 and also 2024 when it comes to the Fujifilm ecosystem. I'll see you there.